Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Hagness. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. Scotty, how's everything going?
Hey, it's going pretty good here.
Office is looking pretty sharp there, dude.
It's coming around. It's basically done. Kind of used to it now.
Nice, man.
So yeah,
You got a lot of fancy writing up there.
that's been up there for a while. There's programming notes. There's some people's HRV parameters. There's
Oh,
my
wow.
count of the nearly 1,500 tries at that trick that I did for the video
Oh,
contest last
wow.
spring. I would just record how many I did each day,
Uh-huh.
and
Holy moly.
so 1,500 on film that were filmed, and then probably easily that many before that I never bothered to try and film.
No kidding. Wow, 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 wow. That's pretty
But
intense.
I wouldn't. Just that I haven't wiped the board, and it's been sitting, for a
Yeah.
few months in storage. So I put it up yesterday.
Do you tend to use the board a lot when you do programming and that kind of stuff?
I'll do big picture stuff, just to get a concept in my head.
Yep.
I'll sketch it out there, and sometimes I just take a photo of it, and then wipe it down, or I transfer ideas then into something.
Yeah, I have to be
But
honest that I don't do a ton of like writing down anymore. Like a lot of the stuff is intuitive. A lot of the stuff is just based upon prior weeks, that kind of stuff, and it's always
yep,
progression. And then obviously interaction with the individual. So like I'll talk to the people on a regular basis so that I know kind of what's going on. Um, you know,
yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, I would say the same. I used to sketch a lot of stuff out on paper, and I
yeah,
don't that much anymore. It does get more intuitive or progression based on how something went, and I would use my writing up there. Like if I'm starting out or it's a new phase, I'll structure out ideas. These things
yeah,
are happening in this range, and I want this to happen in these months, and that kind
yep.
of thing. And then I have that framework to work within.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, unless I like have to write down certain dates, competitions, deloads, particularly, I think a lot of it is just based on feel. So I think that's the kind of in the beginning, I think anybody who's programming, anybody who's doing stuff for themselves or for others, is probably best that you write stuff down because it allows you to kind of get an idea of what you're looking at, and then once you have enough touches on that, then everything's pretty much how things are going to progress. Not how are you going to progress, are the mechanisms of how things are going to progress. It's just the how is based upon the results of the athlete and the feedback from the athlete. And it's very interesting. I think we both commented on the post the other day about I think James from OPT or OPEX talked about sustainability in terms of like mixed modal work and
Mm-hmm.
how making contractions sustainable is important. So I think that's one of the things that in the sport of CrossFit, you know, uh, is the most important part about it. You know what I mean? That's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
separates everything else. So there's weightlifting, there's aerobic tests. So let's say it's rowing or running or swimming. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And then there's in the middle, which is what I call CrossFit. Um, what do you think is the role, or what do you think are the ways that we are now seeing after, almost for you, it's over a decade at this point, probably, or close to a decade. Yeah, probably over a decade for you. How does it look now in terms of what we're trying to do to create growth in the sport for an individual?
Yeah, it's so much more precise nowadays than it was. And I was having a conversation with a couple of athletes here this morning about how every one of the competitive movements now is, it's very refined skill, and people
Mm,
understand they'd be very proficient at that skill because we're kind of harking back to like, well, how it was done in the old days. Is like, you just kind of got in and got it done. It was just a movement, where it's not,
yep.
uh, where now they're all each very refined skills, and it's clear that there's a successful method of doing it, and there's ones that are less successful. So there's a big focus on having, at the highest level, you have to have the skills all perfected and able to do them under fatigue and in all sorts of circumstances. But then the sustainability piece is something that I think people are finally coming around to understanding how to train for it. Because I
Mm,
think the people who are good earlier on, and even in the middle phases were maybe somewhat naturally, they sort of figured out how to do it naturally without necessarily attempting to go out and develop it.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to figure out how to actually develop that.
Yeah. It's actually very interesting because I think that's kind of how all sport works is like you get a few outliers in the sport who just dominate, and then you kind of break that individual down into what makes them great. And then you train those things, and then you have the Alpha 2.0, and then once we break down Alpha 2.0, we have Alpha 3.0. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what's happened. So, like for the sport in particular that we're talking about, CrossFit, we had Rich Froning, who was the sustainability champ. And then you have Matt Frazier, who I think is, Rich 2.0. So what you look at Rich, he was able to do multiple contractions. Overall, absolute strength was very good relative to the field, but not the best. But his ability to maintain sustainability through submaximal work allowed him to be the best in the world. Now you look at Matt, you see somebody who's actually more refined in their ability to do the movements, smaller and the same strength relative. And then you also have, basically the mindset of this athlete as well, which we don't have to talk too much about. But I think in terms of what we're talking about, the how they train this, you see that people aren't just smashing metcons anymore. They have progressions through the off season. They work on strength in the off season. They work on aerobic ability. Then they build the volume, and then they layer in complexity. And they're always working sustainability. And you don't really see too many people. I mean, they do because they're knuckleheads who are smashing it really hard all year round now. You're seeing a lot more progression based and breathing based work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, like, I guess I'll pose this: is what would a 5 year into the game regional slash games competitor look like in terms of trying to improve their performance for testing plastic CrossFit, where there's multiple contractions, multiple movements, and workouts between 8 to 15 minutes long, from post CrossFit games to open, let's say, or maybe even let's say to regionals. Just throwing that out there as a general
If you're,
idea.
yeah, if you're at that level, you may just train through the opens and
Yeah,
really be on a regional plan.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's in a general nutshell. I think there's going to be a phase of recovery work where you're working lower end aerobic and kind of recovering maybe some top end strength that might have been lost,
mm-hmm.
um, just with the volume and muted CNS that would come from the
From
lead up to the
competing. Yeah,
games.
and
Yep.
I
And
guess
then
also that is also relative to the individual in terms of how long you stay with that off-season recovery program.
exactly,
Okay.
yeah, very individual. And then building capacity, and that depends, where the individual is lacking. But I see, ways to build sustainability, and it's difficult to RX without an eye, even for that person.
Yep.
I think with experience, you can see and kind of know, like, okay, this number of this exercise is sustainable. If I give more than that, we're going to start dipping into something else. But over time, you can progress those exercise, adding reps, or maybe it's load, or changing the order. But trying to find sustainability and build on that, and be probably quite a few sessions and quite a few different scenarios in a training week over a phase of building that.
Mm-hmm. It was funny because I was finally getting into some block two, or like, phase two training with some of my athletes now that the summer is pretty much over. And now we're actually looking toward some off-season competitions and then the open. And that's where most of my athletes will try to peak, is the open. So, the open ended in April. And then, so you have April, May, June, July, August. So I would say probably maybe 6 months of off-season type training where we're building aerobic ability. Most of the athletes that I'm training, they're building absolute strength during that time as well. So, this whole challenging kind of melee that is programming for an athlete. And as a coach, you're like, where do I start? How do I do this? Because like, I think of this as like, how what would I tell my 7, 8 year ago self how to do this stuff? And, again,
Hmm.
breaking it down into simple parts, and, each phase is based upon what the demand calls for, but also in the time constraint of the year. So, like, all right, you have to be ready for February. That means that you have to kind of, I guess, what is it called, where you build it from the end back, retrofit or retro build, right?
Yeah, retroactively program.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So you got to be here at this
Hmm.
time, which means you have to be doing this at this time, this at this time, and this is what you can do during this time. And then you kind of just take whatever gains you got, and then you blend it into the next phase. So it's like you can't just stay in absolute strength all the time unless you're just planning on doing, all right, like let's take 2 years, let's just do the open, doesn't matter, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get stronger, and then maybe try to make a run at it or something like that. But I doubt that most people even want to do that, because I think most people are trying to look for fun and competitiveness within the sport.
Right.
So, do you have any experience with that yourself, there, Scott, in terms of
Uh,
your athletes?
yeah, it's taking a longer view approach of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think
but
we did
but
even,
yeah, we
with
definitely did
Turkey.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I've
even
had a,
even in that, taking a longer term approach. But like when you do take a long term approach, how do you keep the not only the athlete thirsty,
Mhm.
but also continue to progress them in the fashion that they need.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally people are going to enter some kind of contest, whether it's the opens, even though maybe it's not the peaking year they're really trying to make a run,
Yep.
or maybe it's other various events, OC throwdown back,
Yeah.
yeah, those sorts of things. But there's I've had cases where that wasn't the case, and then I usually will work up some sort of in-house testing scenario, a phase we're building toward with things that we feel like will be good indicators of progress,
Mm-hmm.
and then we hit that as if it's an event, to try to get something that you're excited about and working hard for, and then you can kind of benchmark where you're at. But yeah, it takes a lot of patience for sure.
Yeah. Very
But
cool.
as long as you're keeping the gains, keeping it moving,
Yep.
and yeah, programming is the more it becomes so much more of an art form, I think, and intuitive the longer you do it.
Yep.
And because as you mentioned a little earlier, I'm kind of mentoring our new coach here. She's been trained at the gym, open gym. She's done training think tank. She's one of Max's clients and has
Yep.
been for a number of years. And
Yep.
so I'm trying to mentoring her on programming,
Mm-hmm.
and realized as I was going over a variety of different example programs, and how much when I tried to verbalize what I'm doing,
I know.
it's like, well, I know this because this and this and that, but
Yeah.
yeah, so it's making me go back and create some structure, even though
Yeah.
it's there, but putting it down and creating
Yeah.
something.
It's just I have such no interest in doing that. Like I would hire someone to just follow me around and just dictate notes and then transcribe that into what I'm thinking. But I have no interest in actually doing that. Like I don't. I hate looking at numbers. I hate. It's just I don't do it. Like I mean, I can do it enough where I can like understand and I have a basic knowledge of it, but I don't geek out on numbers. I don't. I love feel. I'm like, all right, what does this movement look like? What's the quality of the movement? How did that workout go? Like that's more of what I kind of do now. In ways, spinning my wheels with some athletes, maybe I spin my wheels with athletes, but I think most of the athletes that I'm working with are improving the quality of movement, and I think that's the biggest part about sustainability in the sport as is, and I think you can probably agree with that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, programming is important, but it isn't the magic that maybe
Yeah,
you can be led to think. It's the quality of movement, keeping consistency. Um, those things go a long way, and
yeah,
because we've all written programs that probably weren't the best, in hindsight, right?
yeah.
but people still manage to get better at some point, And I
Yeah.
think, at very high level, very highest level of all sports, then the numbers really do start to matter more. And the more pure the sport is,
Yeah.
volume and training a power lifter is so different than trying to train a CrossFitter to be
Yeah.
strong because of the multiple demands, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, and I think the multiple demands and the variability within the sport, it's just so hard to actually do something where you're like, all right, this is what the plan is, and it's like,
Yeah.
there's your
It's,
plan.
it's,
Whew. You know how many times I've
yeah.
sat on the freaking whiteboard or wrote it down in my notepad, and I'm like, oh, this looks great. We got this, that, the other thing. 3 days into the program, I can't do this. My back blew up. I'm like, shit. Like,
Yeah, I
now
know.
what do I do? So it's like, it's such a organic
You'd have to change.
morphing kind of thing where, again, like going by feel and having an eye on the athlete. I'm such a stickler now about being able to see the athlete. Like, I have very few remote clients now where I'm like, and if I do have a remote client, I'm like, you better be sending me video, and we got to make time to actually sit to like look at each other and be like, yo, this is what you're doing, this is what you have to do,
Mhm.
because those are the things that restrict people. Like, if you're wondering why your split jerk hasn't gone up in 5 years, can you put your hands over your head? It's
Mhm.
not the pressing progressions, it's not the
Yeah.
amount of
It's not,
jerks
you
you
had the
do,
percentages
it's
wrong
not the
or something.
percentages, it's not
Yeah.
your relative no, stop it. It's because your movement sucks.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally.
And
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
know, we've been banding it and distracting it and everything. Like, rib cage is king in my mind. As soon as we can make or establish some rib cage positioning, then we can go ahead and start adding in some cool programming and stuff like that. And then there's awesome progressions that I've seen, especially through the functional bodybuilding realms of, like, all sorts of and I think Marcus Philly does it very nicely. Obviously he's had a lot of experience with it in terms of kneeling to half kneeling to full kneeling to standing to. I mean, there's a great stuff. But the thing
Yeah.
is, I've done that shit before, and I'm like, well, if the foundation isn't there of being able to do A and B, all the progression in the worlds are only going to get you so far. Now, I
Hmm.
might be a person who says, like, we're going to work on this until it's perfect. And I understand people are like, well, then when are we actually going to be doing the competing? I'm like, all right, we'll compete, but you're always working on this. Always. You're never going to be like, all right, box checked. Here we go. My split jerk's awesome now. Like, no, like, I think that's one of the most overlooked things in general in the sport is overhead positioning. I was looking at a video of Brent Fikowski. He was doing jerk recoveries with chains, and I must have had like 300 pounds over his, at least 300 pounds over his head
Hmm.
with chains.
You're
The
talking
person
jerk
was there.
recoveries, like where you set the bar real high in the cage and you
Exactly. And then just
split under
standing
it
up.
and
Yeah, he's
yep,
just
yep,
standing up
yep.
with it. I don't know if you had checked out that video, but you're
I
like,
hadn't
this
seen that one, but I've
this
definitely
guy,
had some
his
experience with that. Yeah.
overhead is phenomenal. I would say probably the best I've seen in CrossFit, and that's better, and that's including Matt Fraser. And I'm like, this is why this guy can do what he does at the amount of volume he does, which requires for the sport. He's number two in the world. He's not tiny. He's 6'2",
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
he's number two in the world, and he's placed on the podium 2 out of the years that he's been at the CrossFit Games. And he's probably one of the only guys who has done a progression based road to the games. I mean, it took him 3 years, I think 3 or 4 tries out of the Northwest to get there. He's come very close, but when you pay the man, so to speak, you can, when you're there, you've earned your ticket. You're not just
Hmm.
pretending.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that we wanted to bring up a little bit, maybe get an update on this, Mr. Scott, is your 20 rep progression. How's that
Hmm.
going?
It has gone pretty well. Outside of that biking injury that tweaked my
Shoulder, right?
shoulder for a little bit, which is mostly back in action, but I've
Uh
kept at
huh.
it with the lower body and the things that I could do, and pretty much still progressing in weight pretty nicely on everything. Added complexity to a few exercises.
Uh
Um,
huh.
I've split the session now where I'm not trying to do all the things at once because it was just an kicker,
Yeah.
especially as the loads got heavier. I mean, it honestly felt like a chipper even as much as I would rest, you know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and then I've got, like I said, I have a handful of clients that are in different places, but it's an appropriate thing for kind of the same deal. And everybody's come along really pretty well. I'm seeing some people now hitting their first plateaus,
Yep.
and so that's where go to more where 14 reps starts to become the target. But again,
Ah.
still pushing the loads up. And then because all the people, including myself, doing this are it's more just general strength. I will
Yep.
rotate the modality of the lift periodically too, so we're not just say back squatting or something, or like in my case, I'm doing double kettlebell front squat work.
Uh-huh.
But I'll change that out. I'll probably bring the safety bar in at some point, and
Yeah. I
yeah,
like that. Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's pretty cool how this goes to a 14 rep kind of deal. And it's just how long are those sessions taking? Are they a little and also describe it? How is the sensation for the 14 rep relative to 20?
I do not know yet because I'm not there. I'm still
Okay.
on 20s,
All
and
right.
I haven't actually dropped anybody down, but
Okay.
it's to the point where I'm about to,
Okay.
and I'm not going to do it all at once. I'm not just say blanket like, all right, we're on 14 for
Oh,
everything.
okay.
I'm gonna if they're making
Certain
good on
movements.
20s still, they're staying there. But some exercises we will shift gears, and
I
then at
love
some
that.
point we'll bring it down.
I love
But it'll
that.
be very individual to the movement, and that makes sense. And given that we know certain muscles are tend to be more fast twitch than others, and
Yep.
you're expecting um, that maybe the strength endurance would be different.
Yeah, I think you hit on something nicely there. It's like don't screw around with it if it's still working.
It's yeah, that's if it's working right.
Yeah. And how,
That's
in your mind, Scott, how do you know if something's working?
well, I would say we're able to progress from session to session, or if there
Hmm.
is a plateau, like maybe the reps don't change, between two workouts. Well, I'm still going to try again on the next time
Yeah, like
because it
we
might
give
have just
one
been a
more
bad
go.
day.
Yeah.
And one thing I've definitely seen with everybody and myself too is like if you push a new threshold on something that, earlier in the workout, you might have some retrograde on some of the later stuff because you
Uh-huh.
just tapped in a little deeper, as you start getting closer to your, and that's okay. And the next go around, then you come back and you hit that one hard. It
Hmm.
just kind of happens rather organically sometimes. Um, so that seems to be good. And the thing I really like is about the way I can not only hit the big movements, but I think I shared a number of times ago. Got things like there's wrist push, uh, calf raises done only on the toes. Very supplemental things that went from being quite difficult to being no, I can actually handle 20 really clean reps on these things now. Which for my sport, I've got to have forearms, hands, and feet really pretty bulletproof
Hmm.
and strong to receive force in weird angles and on a very pretty unstable surface and whatnot.
Yep. Um, what are your favorite lower body movements to do in the 20 rep progression, Scott?
Uh,
You've probably
I
played
yeah,
around with a bunch of
I
them so
yeah,
far.
I've really kind of got a like a thing barring certain circumstances I'd like to
Uh-huh.
go through, which is goblets to a certain point
Yep.
into double kettlebell fronts or
Love that.
uh, dumbbells if needed, and then from there into barbell work, but only once people are handling decent load for 20.
Hmm.
Then I know they're going to own the barbell when we get
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Um, and then depending on the person and their needs, it could be front, back, safety, bar squat
Yep.
after that.
Yep.
Um, Split squat work on the ground, into rear foot elevated,
Uh-huh.
into skater squats, and then on into, shrimp stuff if needed.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and then RDLs, single leg RDLs to double leg RDLs to full deadlifts. Um, is kind of my hinging
Yeah. I
hinging
like
go
that.
tos there.
I
And
like
then
that.
I actually have a much bigger proponent of lateral type stuff. So lateral squats to lateral lunge, those sorts of things
Nice.
are definitely in there as
Yep.
well.
Yep. Wow, that's pretty cool. I like that. What tends to be the biggest limiter for you, or seen for the limiter in terms of lower body hinging?
The biggest limiter.
Yeah, and I have some individuals who they just continually blow up, or not even on high repetitions, but just like they just can't pull. Like, what are some of the things that you
Yeah,
either try, or what are some of the best exercises that you try to?
I
What do you think?
yeah, that's a good one. I think the issues often there are people that are definitely lumbar dominant. So
Yep.
whether they are unable to stabilize their core fully, which we this definitely discussed that in the past. But the other one is the feet glute connection, and really kind of
Ah.
into this whole idea of foot strength and how that is really a driver of that.
Hmm.
Being able to access and switch the glutes on.
Yep.
Everyone I work with, we do a lot of foot strengthening, do a lot of
Ah.
barefoot, short foot, various activation drills that tie the glute and feet together. In fact, I just had one of my semi-remote clients that trains on site at times was in here just last night and working on it. He's just got up to heavy deads in the first time in a while post surgery for her, and we did some short foot kind of 3D glute activation work back to the
Mm-hmm.
deadlift, and it cleaned up her wanting to use the lumbar. And this is not bad form necessarily, but you can see that visually you can see that recruitment is coming from there, and so we were able to really shift that to the glutes more with a little
Yep.
drill of really tying the feet in. One thing, and this is one of those things I had mentioned that I'm exploring and I haven't done it yet, but I'm really looking into doing some protocols of like the glute layering work from the triphasic training guys, which is basically idea is really retraining that to where we get away from that lumbar dominance. So
Yep.
foot glute connection and the kind of very high volume kind of preparatory phase. That'll be something I'm going to personally start playing with over here
Nice.
this fall, and then depending on how it goes there, I'll implement stuff and I'll kind of report
Very
back
cool. Yeah, I think that'd
on
be
that.
really cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool stuff and a good place to stop for this week. You got anything else there, Scotty?
No, I think that's it.
All right, cool. Well, I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean at CrossFitDelrabeach.com. Scott?
I'm Scott. You can get me at Scott at CrossFitPortland.com.
Beautiful, Scotty. Well, we will update next week, and I will see you then.
Yeah, sounds good, brother.
Later, dude.
Later.